Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans. Guys! Hey, sluts. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Swholli Reviews, the only YouTube show where I don't really need a catchphrase to start the video because I don't have one. This month marks the 20th anniversary of 1999's The Matrix. Considered by some as the most innovative sci-fi movie of its decade, is it? What if I told you that the world you know is a lie? A world where you think that the Matrix is actually cool isn't true. It's a simulation. What if I told you I could wake you up, bring you to the world of the real? The Matrix was probably never intended to be this, like, big meta thing. It's about as metaphysical as a fucking rock. Most of the hype around the movie was simply due to marketing. The Matrix was marketed as a thinking man's action movie, but it doesn't really do a lot of thinking. It's mostly just action. What was The Matrix really trying to say? I think it's something completely different. Today we're going to take an analytical look at the movie. We're going to decide for ourselves whether or not it really truly was as mind-blowing as we thought it was. We're going to take the red pill and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. 1999's The Matrix. I've noticed that a lot of the movies that I watch that help shape my cinematic palette are starting to age. Thinking about all the movies that came out in 1999 and beyond, movies that as a young adolescent kid I had watched to really escape from the whole of reality and just start living with a story, these movies shaped me in some way, and now they're all pushing 20 years old. That's like gotta be something important in terms of the grander theme that is the human experience. The story of The Matrix starts pretty strong. Immediately we're given action as the opening sequence. Cops storm some random hotel room that Trinity, the main female lead of the film, is hanging out, tracking Neo.
I sent 2 units. They're bringing her down now.
No, Lieutenant, your men are already dead.
There's this really cool moment where Trinity gets to beat the shit out of some cops, run along the rooftops, and do some sick acrobatics. This really sets the tone. This is an action movie with some darker undertones where the higher-ups are a powerful, possibly superhuman entity. We get our first look at Neo and the nice little bit of visual world building. His cluttered desk, multiple monitors and keyboards, a man in his 30s, living alone, searching for answers. If that ain't every guy who ever started a Reddit account, I don't know what is. I love that Morpheus and the information on him that Neo can dig up are all tabloid and underground sources. He's like a ghost. I also really like how the computer screen switches from doing a deep web search to the now famous The Matrix Has You.
What the hell?
Morpheus, or Trinity, or someone, tells Neo that he should follow the White Rabbit in what I assume sounded clever at the moment but is really sort of silly and cryptic for the sake of being cryptic. I don't know, maybe they just can't tell Neo that he needs to go somewhere because, like, the agents are tracking his every move, but then there was no real guarantee that he'd notice the tattoo in the first place, so how can they be certain that he'd even think that that was what it meant to follow the White Rabbit? It's not very smart. He decides to follow the White Rabbit and go to the nightclub where he meets Trinity in person, who then tells him that the Matrix is still a question he needs to answer. That was actually kind of a wasted scene, to be honest. You could have completely cut the nightclub sequence and gone directly to him getting his ass chewed out at work. You'd have honestly lost nothing. Trinity doesn't give Neo any new information other than, yes, keep doing that thing. You know, looking for Morpheus? Yeah, keep doing that thing you've been doing. Great. Thanks. Morpheus sends Neo an old cell phone while he's at work and he calls him on it, telling him how to escape the building. Neo chooses not to take the advice of a man he's never met to take a scaffolding down a 20-story building and is instead taken into custody by the agents. Eventually finds himself downtown in a creepy old building with creepy old furniture, and none other than Samuel L. Jackson is there to greet him. Morpheus tells him that the world he knows is a simulation called the Matrix, but he can't tell him, he has to show him.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
So Neo, interested in finding the truth, takes the red pill and undergoes the process of waking up and suddenly finds himself in an H.R. Geiger painting.
Welcome to the real world.
The real world is surprisingly much bluer. What happens next is honestly one of the best scenes of the movie. The Construct, as it's called, a loading program outside the Matrix, has Morpheus explaining the main concept of the film, which Neo, unsurprisingly, doesn't take too well and blows chunks. For all of its small faults, the first third of this movie is actually its best stuff, storytelling-wise. The introduction of the characters, the sci-fi concepts, sure, it's just Plato's allegory of the cave retold with a slick new coat of paint, but it's a good setup. The second act is where things begin to fall apart. The start of the second act is really great, with the dojo scene where Morpheus and Neo fight as Neo learns kung fu. It's a great action sequence with good choreography and style. It's classic wire fu of the old Hong Kong action flicks, and it's really fun to watch. The problem is it begins to take itself so seriously. Right around the halfway point of the movie, we get to the most talked about Oracle scene. Neo meets with some younger children who are all potentially the one. They all have an assortment of psychic powers. One little bald kid can bend spoons. He explains to Neo that the way to bend the spoons is to realize the truth. There is no spoon. The Matrix isn't real. None of this is real, and if you let yourself realize that truth, you can alter the spoon's structure at will, as it's not really there. Again, as a concept on paper, this is fine. The scene is intriguing enough, but it's played out in such hammy melodrama, as if to say there's some greater meaning behind all of it, when in reality it's just another enforcement of the same general concept. Nothing is real. We get it. The Matrix is a fake video game land, and this kid's got the cheat codes. He's got the Brady's Guide to the World, Nintendo power, but you're not really profound if all you have to say is the same basic thing over and over again. And then the Oracle makes even less sense. If the Matrix is a computer program, a system written by machines that were originally built by humans, how the fuck is she able to, in any sense of accuracy, predict the future? My suspension of disbelief was, until this point, fine. I was willing to believe that, 1, there were intelligent machines that needed to use humans for power, and they created a virtual reality world to keep the human's brain active and willing to generate this power. 2, in this world where your mind creates and controls the systems around you, physics and other universal rules are written in programming code, and as such, the strong-willed are able to manipulate the world as they see fit. And 3, Neo is a sort of accidental super being created within the Matrix that was granted special access to codes and programming not usually afforded to regular humans plugged into the Matrix, and as such he was the one and could be more powerful and more useful to humans if they awoke his mind and brought him out of the Matrix to further manipulate it to his will. But the Oracle is just batshit. I'm sorry, we've gone full magical realism, Christ-like figure with this. Neo is special because he was always meant to be, that he has powers outside the realm of a normal human, not just because his avatar in the Matrix was special, but because his mind itself was special. That's just hokey, and frankly not really fitting with the setup we've been given up until this point. Neo asks the Oracle at one point, how could she know something advanced? And she answers him with, yeah, but what's really gonna fuck with you is I'm not gonna tell you shit. And that's the answer you get. That's what the movie says. Like, sorry, you're not gonna know. There is no answer. The Matrix at its core is a movie about choice and free will versus predestiny and control. Morpheus, the agent of free will, Agent Smith, the agent of order and control, and that's fine. It's a good lesson to impart with, but you absolutely lose me with this religious undertones, actual superpowers bullshit. The third act begins with Morpheus being kidnapped by the agents as he has codes to Zion's mainframe that allow the machines to infiltrate the city. Neo decides that he must save Morpheus in the most bombastic way possible as he guns down security guards who are most certainly not machines and were probably just still plugged in humans who were only there doing their jobs, only to have Neo mercilessly gun them down in a bullet time-filled bloodbath. He then blows up their digital corpses, steals a helicopter, and fires a minigun into the room Morpheus is using, I assume using his powers as the one to not fucking kill Morpheus. I will add that the scene where he dodges bullets from the agent before stealing the helicopter is definitely cool, and that the lobby shoot-up is pure action movie bliss, but it's visual flair without any substance to back it up, and while the incidental music and shot composition implies that there's some self-important achievement, really it's just stylized bullet porn. The movie ends with a cool kung fu fight between Agent Smith and Neo, where Smith thinks he's done the job when he finally shoots Neo in the chest. However, Neo has a powerful mind, and despite the rule of
if you die in the game, you die for real,
he manages to resurrect himself. He does this fucking, goddammit, this fucking Goku in Dragon Ball level power move where he just stops the agent's bullets in midair. Like, this fucker is just showing off at this point, and I'll hand it to the movie. It has a lot of style. It's slick and it's well made, there's no doubting that. Neo just jumps inside of Agent Smith, again I assume just to fuck with him, and completely annihilates him from the inside out. The other agents run away like little babies. And then Neo and Trinity kiss, because I guess they loved each other? Again, this movie had a lot of great setup in the first third and just fucking blew all of that potential with a weak-ass conclusion. Neo can now fly, I guess. The end. 90s music. Whatever. I had a really fun ride along the way. For what it was worth, the story of The Matrix was really just the backbone of a spectacle for the sake of spectacle story. It was the underlying piece to get characters into neat situations, more so than the driving force of the film. It had its moments, no doubt, but ultimately this was just a comic book on the big screen. It was goofy, fun with some serious moments, but ultimately the problems it had really just drug it down. I think had this been like an animated movie, maybe even an anime, it would have fit the style better. The parts where the wire-fu and gunplay were great really amped up to the extreme, but then they always had to be stopped so we could force-feed the plot some hammy pseudo-philosophy that even a 101 student could write. As far as I can tell, the Wachowskis had a lot of freedom to create the movie they wanted to, or at least that's what the behind-the-scenes material included on the Blu-ray said, but considering that this was their second movie they ever made, with a budget of $63 million, adjusted for inflation closer to $100 million today, I have a feeling that the studio must have stepped in and said something at some point.
This thing probably cost a fraction, he was talking about Bound, a fraction of our picture, and it's so much more interesting and exciting, and God, those guys are good. So that was the desired response.
How are these guys gonna make the jump from a $5 million movie to a $65 million movie? And I was afraid for them.
I like the Wachowskis. I think their work is good, so I don't want to say that they made a bad movie, but maybe they did. I can see what it was that they wanted The Matrix to be. It had a vision and it was clear, but I think that they didn't get to do as big an action movie as they would have liked, so they kind of banked on the plot being pseudo-intellectual as a means to an end. But then again, after The Matrix was a runaway hit and the Wachowskis had probably even more control for the second and third installments of the franchise, well, we all know how those ones turned out. So what does it mean now that The Matrix is 20 years old? I was about 10 or 11 when, like, the sequels came out. And, like, that was, like, when I really got into it, because I remember The Matrix coming out in 99, and I remember people talking about it, and it was a big deal. I didn't see it in theaters yet, because in 99, I think I was still, like, 7, 8 years old. I was still young. But then the sequels came out, and I was, like, 11, 12, and it was, like, right when my adolescence, like, teenage years were, like, starting. So I was kind of the perfect audience member for this movie. I think what pulled me in was just the fact that it was cool. It was stylish. It was interesting. It was different. There really wasn't a movie before that an action movie, like a straight up Hong Kong kung fu wire fu action movie that had a deeper story and narrative behind it. And while looking at it now as an adult 20 years later, I do think that story ultimately was not nearly as deep as we probably once thought it was. I do appreciate what The Matrix was trying to do. The 80s as a decade in terms of action movies were a result of the Cold War mindset of America. Big, dumb, all-American patriots running around, gunning down baddies and kicking ass. It was a time where the enemy, as we all knew it, was a tangible one where the commies were real people with real, tangible threats that could be stopped. Don't let the Russians get the bomb. Don't let the Russians steal the money. Don't let the Russians invade America. But then the 90s hit and the grunge counterculture was in full swing and the Cold War ended. Hollywood didn't have a tangible enemy anymore. The great ideology of the late 80s Reaganomics and the jobs boom under Clinton meant that as a society we felt like we had won not only the Cold War but the arguments of ideas. Society made movies about vapid white teenagers with no direction, disenfranchised youth with no motivations who just wanted to laze around and fuck Steve Buscemi. The Matrix has one thing to say, and that is that the world around you, the world that you know, and the reason you feel so disenfranchised is probably because the reality that you're aware of is not real. That on a literal level, your brain is making it real because the electrical signals, everything you know, that is reality. Our interpretation, our viewpoint, that's reality. And it's very easy to have that manipulated by something else. And then on a more metaphorical, figurative level, the reality that we know of society as a whole pushing itself down onto you. It's very telling to me that the Wachowskis, as trans women, wrote this movie how they wrote it. 20 years later, the story is very much, I think, a personal manifesto for the two. I think the siblings are basically trying to say that the world you know is what you have. How you perceive things is what you've got. The bad guy isn't tangible. The bad guy is society. The bad guys are the fascists running around telling you how to think, what to like, who to hate. The corporations that own the world are keeping you in a simulated state of being where you think things are okay because that's just how it's always been. And in today's day and age, this is a message I think that we as an audience need to hear and internalize even more so now than in the 90s. The Matrix was a warning of a world that could be, and so far we've helped create that world in everything but a literal simulation we plug ourselves into, but we still have a figurative one. The irony that the phrase red pill has become its own term in the alt-right lexicon, that something created by two trans women has been co-opted into online neo-Nazi dogma, is so sad. I think ultimately The Matrix proves that people are willing to see action movies that don't think for them, but I don't think that The Matrix pushed the envelope far enough. I think a movie like The Matrix, visceral and pulpy action-oriented sci-fi that tells a story about how the wool has been pulled over your eyes and that the world is not as it seems, the controlling force in your life is an illusion, you can break free and we could, as a society, all live in a better world, I think there's merit to that. I remember the cultural shift and impact that happened when The Matrix came out. I remember people talking about, like, the visuals and the parodies that came out around about it. I remember the fan films. People were making movies with The Matrix in mind because of just how interesting and different it was. I remember the Flash cartoons that would have appeared on the internet, you know, back then, and I remember watching them and enjoying them and thinking they were funny. And, you know, even they have aged sort of poorly, like...
Well, my good sir, I believe I created that technique, and therefore you are in breach of Copyright Act, Section 403, subsection 76. Besides, that was disgraceful. Truly amateur. Observe, a master at work. Wait, I almost have it. I have a bad feeling about this.
I think just not necessarily as a critic, but just as a consumer of media, I'm trying, I guess, to realize that nostalgia isn't all it's cracked up to be, and that maybe we as a society need to realize that just because something was good once doesn't mean it's going to continue to hold up into the future. And that's okay. It's okay to change, it's okay for things to change, and it's okay for your opinions and tastes to change. While doing research for this review, I found that there's some talks going around on the web saying that they're considering rebooting or remaking The Matrix. If you'd told me about that, say 5 years ago, I'd have said that that was crazy and that they shouldn't break something that was already good, but frankly, today I'm all for it. I want to see a Matrix movie that embraces fully the ideology that the Wachowskis set. I think that they had the right mindset, just not all the right tools or audience expectation. A Matrix movie made today would have to do one of two things. Either really turn up the story as the main focus of the theme, diving into the philosophy more and actually asking some more profound sci-fi questions and simply setting up something neat only to use the rest of it for little to no interesting plot, or ramp up the action to insane levels of tongue-in-cheek fun, going for in no way a sense of realism, but just pure kung fu tricks a la Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Either impress me with a deep story that's unafraid of delving into harsher criticisms of the society that births it, or give me a balls-to-the-wall crazy that never takes itself so seriously that it loses momentum. You can't have your cake and eat it too, and that's kind of what The Matrix tried to do, and failed spectacularly. It's not to say that I dislike The Matrix. I do. I still like it. It's still fun, it's still action, it's still campy, and I think it's just a good time to have, but I don't think it is at all a deep story, and I think we need to, like, reset. I think that's the thing to take away, is we need to hit the reset button on what we consider to be cerebral action films, because I don't think that one has been made yet. We used to say, oh, this was it, like, oh, this is the thinking man's action movie, and it's not. And I think somebody out there still has yet to make one. So that was my review of The Matrix. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you looked at it with a few new eyes that you hadn't looked at it before. You should go to the doctor if you have extra eyes. Maybe you learned a thing or two. Probably not. I didn't learn anything. What do you think about The Matrix? Does it still hold up to you? Do you still think it has merits, values that I didn't see in it? Do you have any defenses? Any kind of things that you want to say that, you know, I think you're completely full of bullshit, Swholli. I think The Matrix is still really cool. And if that's the case, that's fine. Let me know. Leave a comment down below. I'm doing that now, mostly because nobody talks to me. I'm trying to get myself onto schedule, but hopefully every third Friday of the month, I should have a new video out on my channel. I'm going to try to be consistent, have stuff. I've got a big list of things I want to do, and hopefully I can get through them and actually have content to produce for you guys.
Please subscribe.
Please subscribe. The Matrix hurt me.
My girlfriend says I can't do it.
My girlfriend says I can't. If I can get 1,000 likes on this video, my girlfriend says I can get a puppy.
Or you're real bad.
There you go. That's it. That's the end. That's the one. Thank you. Goodbye.